Peter Pan kills children. Not pirates. Not Captain Hook. The Lost Boys themselves. When they start to grow up, Peter thins them out. That is the phrase James Matthew Barrie used in the original story. Thinned out. Like weeds. Like mistakes. Like evidence that must disappear. The story was sold as never growing up. The truth is darker. It is about what happens to children who try. Tonight, we open the archive on the most disturbing fairy tale ever sold as innocent. Barrie's own published text describes Peter murdering the boys who age, feeding his followers imaginary food while they starve, and luring lost children from London parks with promises they will never have to face the adult world. Disney erased this. Your childhood erased this. But the original story remains. This is the Pandora's Project. We excavate what was buried in your bedtime stories. Subscribe if you are ready to see Peter Pan without the fairy dust. Like if you have always sensed something wrong beneath the magic. Comment what Disney made you forget. In these pages, what emerges is darker than any bedtime story should be. Part 1. The story Disney buried. You know the Disney version. 3 children from London, Wendy, Michael, and John Darling, their parents at an evening party when Peter Pan arrives through the window. He teaches them to fly with fairy dust and happy thoughts. They soar to Neverland, a magical island where children never age, where Peter leads his lost boys in battles against the villainous Captain Hook and his pirate crew. The children have adventures with mermaids, fight alongside indigenous people Disney called Indians, narrowly escape walking the plank, and fly home safely before their parents return. Hook falls into the jaws of a ticking crocodile. Peter promises to visit every spring. Everyone lives happily. That version is a lie designed to sell toys and theme park tickets. What we find in the original text, what publishers printed in 1904, what existed before corporations sanitized childhood, reveals something far darker. Peter Pan first appeared in Barrie's book The Little White Bird, published in 1902 in London, the capital of England in the United Kingdom. In this version, Peter is described as a magical boy who escaped from humanity when he was 7 days old. 7 days. A newborn who will remain an infant forever. The book states very clearly that there is not the slightest chance he will ever have a birthday. Barrie was obsessed with trapping children in eternal innocence, preserving them like specimens under glass. The story became a stage play in 1904 called Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up. It was performed in London's West End theatre district and became so wildly popular that Barrie rewrote it as a novel in 1911 called Peter and Wendy. This is where the true darkness lives. In the original story, Peter Pan is not a hero. He is something far more dangerous. When Wendy first arrives in Neverland, she is shot out of the sky with an arrow, not by pirates, by the Lost Boys themselves, because Tinkerbell lied and told them Peter ordered Wendy's death. Tinkerbell is jealous, you see. She wants Peter for herself. The arrow pierces Wendy's chest. She falls. The boys think they have killed her. Peter arrives and examines Wendy's body. The arrow struck a button on her nightgown, an acorn button Peter had given her in London. The button saved her life. Peter orders the boys to build her a house around where she fell, a structure they call a Wendy house. She will recover there. But while she heals, Wendy learns the truth about Peter's island. The Lost Boys are all children who fell from their baby carriages in Kensington Gardens, a royal park in central London. When no one came to claim them, Peter found them. He approached them exactly as he approached the Darlings, with promises of magic and freedom. He told them to come to his island where there are no rules, no adults, no bedtimes, no school. They could do whatever they wanted forever. This is the behavior of a predator, an adult who lures lost and confused children with promises of freedom and adventure. But here is where Disney stops showing you the truth. Peter kills the lost boys. When they start to grow up, he thins them out. That is Barrie's exact phrase. Thinned out. He also alters their bodies, breaking bones and reshaping limbs so they can still fit through the tree holes that lead to their underground hideout. Sometimes he feeds them imaginary food because he cannot tell the difference between real meals and pretend. A magical child with the memory of a goldfish, playing God with real children's lives. This is what Barrie wrote. This is what your childhood was built on. A fantasy about a place where children never grow up, controlled by someone who will kill to preserve their innocence forever. The question Disney will not let you ask is simple. Why would anyone want children to stay children forever? What kind of person needs that? What does Peter Pan really represent? The archive holds the answer. The nightmare runs deeper than fantasy. Part 2. Barrie's original nightmare. In these records, what emerges is not an adventure. It is a nightmare dressed as fantasy. The first truly dangerous mission Peter sends the Darlings on takes place at Mermaid Lagoon. The mermaids are not cute like Disney showed you. They are cruel to Wendy, mocking her, splashing her, trying to pull her under the water. They treat her like an intruder, because in Neverland, females who are not fairies are threats. Then Captain Hook's ship, the Jolly Roger, emerges from fog. Hook's men had kidnapped Tiger Lily, the chief's daughter from the indigenous tribe that lives on the island. The pirates planned to force her to reveal the location of Peter's hideout by threatening her with torture. When she refused, they tied her to a rock in the middle of the lagoon at low tide. When the tide came back in, she would drown slowly. Peter saves her by sneaking onto the ship and imitating Captain Hook's voice perfectly. Peter is a master of mimicry, you see. He can copy any sound. He orders the pirates to release Tiger Lily. The real Captain Hook climbs aboard just as Tiger Lily jumps into the water and escapes. Peter reveals himself. A fight begins. Here is a detail Disney would never show you. Captain Hook has no one standing watch on his ship. He does not need guards. The souls of everyone he has murdered protect the Jolly Roger for miles in every direction. The spirits of the dead, trapped in his service, warning him of danger. Hook is not just a pirate. He is a collector of ghosts. The fight goes badly for Peter. Hook wounds him with his hook, slashing Peter's ribs. Peter becomes stranded on the same rock where Tiger Lily was meant to drown, unable to fly because of his injuries. He makes peace with death. He actually prepares to die. But a bird that was nesting nearby offers Peter its nest. He uses it as a small boat, floating back to shore on a nest made of twigs and feathers. Meanwhile, Wendy begins to fall in love with Peter. She is at that age where girls start to feel things they do not understand. But when she asks Peter what he thinks of her, what he feels toward her, he says something disturbing. He tells her she is like his mother, and he is her dutiful son. That is not romance. That is not friendship. That is Peter forcing Wendy into a role she did not ask for. He needs a mother, not a companion. He needs someone to take care of him and the Lost Boys. Wendy realizes this. She remembers her real parents in London, who must be worried sick by now. She decides it is time to go home, and she invites the Lost Boys to come with her. Her parents will adopt them all. The Lost Boys are thrilled. They want families. They want to grow up. They want real food and warm beds and someone to care about them. Peter refuses. He will not go. He decides to take a nap instead while everyone prepares to leave. Think about that. The children he lured to his island want to escape, and he responds by going to sleep. He does not argue. He does not beg them to stay. He simply stops caring the moment they stop being useful. But Peter is not really sleeping. He is planning. On their way back to London, Wendy and the Lost Boys are captured by pirates. Hook's men take them to the Jolly Roger. Hook plans to make them all walk the plank. He also sends a wrapped gift to Peter's hideout, a beautifully decorated box with a bow. Inside is a bomb. Hook knows Peter will open it. Peter eventually wakes up. Tinkerbell tells him about the danger. He flies to the ship, and on the way he encounters the ticking crocodile that has been hunting Captain Hook ever since it bit off his hand and tasted how delicious he was. The crocodile also swallowed a clock, so it ticks wherever it goes. Hook is terrified of that ticking sound. Peter, being a master of imitation, copies the ticking. He ticks like the crocodile. Animals and pirates alike flee from the sound. Peter boards the ship, frees the children, and a battle begins. The Lost Boys fight like savage little warriors. They kill all but 2 of the pirates. Blood everywhere. Children stabbing grown men with knives and swords. Peter fights Captain Hook in a duel. It is not a fair fight. Hook is wounded, exhausted, terrified. Peter kicks him off the ship directly into the jaws of the waiting crocodile. Hook is eaten alive. Peter becomes the new captain of the Jolly Roger. He steals Hook's coat and hat. The children sail the pirate ship back to London. But here's the part Disney deleted entirely. Peter was not ready to let the darlings go. He flew ahead of the ship to the Darling house in London. He planned to lock the bedroom window with iron bars so when the children arrived, they would think their parents had locked them out. They would think their parents did not want them anymore. They would have no choice but to return to Neverland with him. But when Peter reached the window and looked inside, he saw something that stopped him. Mr. and Mrs. Darling were weeping. The mother was collapsed in a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The father was holding her, trying to comfort her, but he was crying too. They had left the window open every night since the children disappeared, hoping they would come home. Peter saw their grief and changed his mind. He unlocked the window. He let the children return. Why? Not because he cared about the children, not because he felt guilty, but because he saw that the parents still wanted them. Peter only values things that are wanted. Once something is no longer desired, he discards it. The Darlings are reunited with their parents. The Lost Boys are adopted and raised to adulthood. But Peter makes a deal with Wendy. He will come back for her every spring for 1 week so she can clean his house and care for him. Wendy agrees. But Peter has no sense of time. After a few years, he forgets entirely. 25 years pass before he returns. When he finally comes back, Wendy is an adult. She is married. She has a daughter named Jane. Peter does not remember Wendy. He does not remember Tinkerbell. He does not remember Captain Hook or the Lost Boys or any of it. His memory has erased everything. But he still needs a mother for his new Lost Boys. So he makes the same deal with Jane. She will visit him every spring. When Jane grows up, she has a daughter named Margaret. Peter makes the same deal with Margaret. Then Margaret has a daughter, and Peter makes the same deal again. This is the true horror. An eternal cycle where generation after generation of girls are bound to this boy who never remembers them but keeps coming back. A creature who forgets but never stops hunting. A predator who does not age, does not learn, and does not stop. Peter Pan does not grow up, but that does not make him innocent. It makes him dangerous, because a child with power and no consequences is not a fantasy. It is a nightmare. The nightmare came from somewhere, from a man whose own life mirrored the fiction he created. What we find in his story is not invention. It is confession. Part 3. The Davies Family Tragedy. James Matthew Barrie was born in 1860 in Kirriemuir, Scotland, a small town in the eastern part of Scotland in the United Kingdom. He was the 9th of 10 children. His childhood was unremarkable until 1867, when he was 6 years old. His older brother David died 2 days before his 14th birthday. Another boy knocked David over while ice skating. David hit his head on the ice and never woke up. He died at 13. In the family records, what we find is a mother destroyed by loss. Margaret Ogilvy had favored David among the 8 who survived infancy, but she found one small comfort in her grief. She told herself that David would remain forever young in her memory, forever 13, forever innocent, forever her little boy. James watched his mother retreat into this fantasy. He watched her refuse to let David age in her mind. And something broke inside James. He began trying to replace David. He wore David's clothes. He tried to act like David. He even whistled the way David used to whistle, hoping his mother would notice him, love him, see him as more than just the living reminder of what she had lost. It did not work. Margaret Ogilvy spent the rest of her life mourning the son who would never grow up. And James Matthew Barrie spent the rest of his life obsessed with the same idea. Boys who stay young forever. Boys who never have to face adulthood. Boys preserved in time like insects in amber. 30 years later, in 1898, James was a successful author living in London. He was walking through Kensington Gardens one afternoon when he met 2 young boys, George and John Llewellyn Davies, ages 5 and 4. They were with their nanny. Barrie was charming, polite, well-dressed. He befriended the boys. He invented games for them. He told them stories about fairies and pirates and magical islands. The boys loved him. They told their parents about the funny man in the park. Barrie met Arthur and Sylvia Llewellyn Davies, the boys' parents. He befriended them too. Over the next few years, he became close to the entire family. They had 3 more sons, Peter, Michael, and Nico. Barrie visited constantly. The family called him Uncle Jim. On the surface, it looked innocent. A successful writer with no children of his own, spending time with a family he adored. But the way Barrie wrote about these boys was not innocent. In his book, The Little White Bird, the same book where Peter Pan first appeared, Barrie wrote a passage about an adult man who befriends a young boy named David. Notice the name, David. The same name as Barrie's dead brother. The same name as the Davies family surname, just slightly changed. In the book, the adult man lies to David's parents. He tells them he had a son who died, creating false empathy to bond with them. He uses grief as a tool to get closer to their child. Barrie also wrote letters to the Davies boys that have been preserved in archives. One letter in particular, written to Michael Davies for his birthday, is deeply disturbing. Michael was Barrie's favorite among the 5 brothers. The letter reads, "I wish I could be with you and your candles. You can think of me as one of your candles, the one that burns badly, the greasy one that is bent in the middle. But do hurry and light me. I am Michael's candle. I wish I could see you putting on the redskin clothes for the first time." He calls himself a greasy candle bent in the middle. He wants to watch Michael getting dressed. And then the final line, "Dear Michael, I like you very much, but don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. That is not normal. That is not appropriate. Even for the early 1900s, when boundaries were different, this crosses lines that should not be crossed." But it gets worse. In 1907, Arthur Llewellyn Davies died of jaw cancer. He was only 44 years old. Sylvia, now a widow with 5 young sons, struggled to care for them alone. Barrie helped financially. He was there constantly, supporting the family. 3 years later, in 1910, Sylvia died of lung cancer. She was only 43. The 5 Davies boys were now orphans. The will stated that they should go to their grandmother, Jenny. But when the will was delivered to Jenny, something was wrong. The will said the boys should go to Jimmy, not Jenny. Jimmy was Barrie's nickname. Jenny was the grandmother's name. The names are too similar to be a simple mistake. Family members accused Barrie of deliberately altering the will. He was the one who transcribed it. He was the one who delivered it. And he was the one who benefited. Barrie denied changing anything. The accusation was never proven, but the result was clear. James Matthew Barrie became the guardian of 5 orphaned boys. He raised them. He controlled them. He had exactly what he wanted. Boys who would depend on him, need him, stay close to him. Most of the boys survived into adulthood, though their lives were marked by tragedy and struggle. George was killed in World War I in 1915. He was 21. Peter, the boy whose name Barrie used for his eternal child character, struggled his entire life with being associated with Peter Pan. He eventually died by suicide in 1960 by throwing himself under a train. He was 63 years old. But the most disturbing death was Michael. Michael Davies drowned in 1921. He was 20 years old, swimming in a pool at Oxford University in England with his close friend Rupert Buxton. Both of them drowned together. Their bodies were found in the water, Michael's arms wrapped around Rupert. The official verdict was that Michael had tried to save Rupert, or that they had both suffered some kind of accident. But there were whispers. Whispers that it might have been suicide. Whispers that Michael and Rupert were more than friends, and that in 1921 England, where such relationships were illegal and shameful, they might have chosen death together. Barrie was devastated by Michael's death. Michael had been his favorite. The boy he wrote the most letters to. The boy he was closest to. After Michael died, Barrie's writing became darker, more obsessed with death and lost children. Some historians believe Barrie's relationship with the Davies boys was purely platonic, that he simply loved children in an innocent, avuncular way. Others point to the letters, the possessiveness, the way he inserted himself into their family, and see something more troubling. The evidence is incomplete. Human motivation is complex, but the pattern is undeniable. A man obsessed with keeping boys young forever. A man who wrote stories about a magical child who murders boys when they try to grow up. And real boys in that man's life who died young, who killed themselves, who never escaped the shadow of the stories he wrote about them. Peter Pan is not just a fantasy. It is a reflection, a mirror of Barrie's own terror of time, growth, and loss. And if you read the story knowing this, if you see Peter Pan through the lens of Barrie's life, the question becomes unavoidable. Was Peter Pan ever really about the children? Or was it always about the man who could not let them go? Part 4. Neverland as Death's Garden. There is a theory about Peter Pan that changes everything once you hear it. A theory supported by literary scholars, psychologists, and historians who have studied Barrie's work and life. The theory is simple, and it is horrifying. Neverland is not a magical island. It is the afterlife. And Peter Pan is not a hero. He is a psychopomp, a guide who leads dead children to the other side. In Barrie's own text, what we discover changes the entire story. In the original book, Barrie describes how children get to Neverland. They fall from their baby carriages in Kensington Gardens. If no one claims them within 7 days, they are taken to the island. But on this page, what emerges is more disturbing than legend. Barrie states that Peter Pan is the guide for children who die young. He literally writes that Peter helps children who die in their sleep, children who are lost, children who will never go home. Victorian and Edwardian England, the time period when Barrie was writing from 1870 to 1920, had catastrophic child mortality rates. 1 in every 5 children died before reaching their 5th birthday. Families regularly lost multiple children to disease, accidents, starvation, and neglect. Death was not an abstraction. It was a constant presence in every household. Parents had to find ways to cope with this horror. They told themselves stories about where their children went. They invented fantasies of magical places where dead children could still play, still laugh, still be happy. Neverland is that fantasy made literal. Think about what happens in the story. The Lost Boys never grow up. They never age. They exist in a place where time does not pass normally, where they fight battles but never truly die, where they eat imaginary food because they no longer need physical sustenance. They are ghosts playing at being alive. Peter himself is described as having baby teeth, teeth that never fall out. He also has no memory. He forgets everything. Names, faces, entire adventures vanish from his mind the moment they end. This is not just childish forgetfulness. This is the behavior of someone who exists outside of time, someone who is not fully alive in the way living people are alive. When Peter visits the Darling house at the beginning of the story, he is looking for his shadow. His shadow has been cut off and trapped in a drawer. In folklore and mythology across dozens of cultures, losing your shadow means losing your soul or your connection to the living world. Peter is literally separated from his own humanity. And what does Peter do with the children he collects? He takes them to an island where they fight pirates forever. They battle Hook's crew in endless cycles of violence. Children stabbing, shooting, killing grown men. But none of it has real consequences because they are already beyond consequences. They are already dead. The pirates themselves may be former Lost Boys. Think about it. Hook is described as the only man Captain Flint, a famous pirate from other stories, ever feared. Hook is educated, well-spoken, obsessed with good form and proper manners. He is not a common criminal. He is a gentleman who became a monster. Some scholars suggest Hook was once a lost boy himself, one who grew too old and escaped Peter's control, only to become trapped in Neverland anyway, cursed to play the villain forever. When Wendy and her brothers visit Neverland, they are not really flying there. They are dying in their sleep. The entire adventure is a near-death experience, a journey to the threshold between life and death. When they return to London and wake up in their beds, they have been given a second chance. They have been allowed to come back. But the Lost Boys cannot return because they crossed over completely. They died, and there is no coming back from that. Barrie himself hinted at this interpretation. In the original stage play, he included a scene that was later cut. Mrs. Darling, the mother, is sitting by the window waiting for her children to return. She falls asleep. In her dream, she sees Peter Pan. He is trying to close the window, trying to lock her children out forever. But she is stronger than him. She forces the window back open. She fights death itself to bring her children home. This is not a subtle metaphor. This is Barrie telling the audience exactly what Peter represents. He is the thief who steals children. He is the force that takes them away from their families. He is death wearing the face of a playful boy. And Barrie knew this. He wrote Peter Pan 7 years before his favorite Davies boy, Michael, drowned at age 20. When Michael died, Barrie said in a letter to a friend that Michael had finally gone to Neverland. Not as a joke. Not as a metaphor. He said Michael had gone to the place Barrie had been writing about for decades. The place where lost boys go when they die young. Victorian families who lost children were told to take comfort in the idea that their sons and daughters were in a better place, playing with other angel children, free from pain and suffering. Neverland is that Victorian fantasy given shape and story. It is a grief narrative disguised as an adventure. But Barrie added something uniquely disturbing to this fantasy. He made the guide, the caretaker of these dead children, into a killer himself. Peter does not just accept the children who come to him. He thins them out. He murders them when they try to grow. Because in Barrie's version of the afterlife, even death is not escape enough. Even dead children must be controlled, culled, shaped into what Peter wants them to be. This is why the story feels wrong, even when you cannot explain why. This is why Peter Pan has haunted generations of readers and viewers with a sense of unease beneath the magic. Because we recognize, even if we do not consciously understand, that this is a story about stolen children who will never come home. This is a story about parents who lose their sons and daughters and tell themselves those children are happy somewhere else. This is a story about a man who could not let go of dead boys, so he wrote them into eternal tongue existence and called it paradise. Neverland is not an island. It is a graveyard. And Peter Pan is not its prisoner. He is its keeper. The only question left is why Barrie needed this story to exist. What was he trying to preserve? What was he trying to control? The answer lies in the final archive, the one Barrie himself tried to seal forever. Part 5. The Legacy Sealed in Copyright. In 1929, James Matthew Barrie made a decision that would ensure Peter Pan could never die. He gave the copyright to all his Peter Pan works to Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children in London. The hospital has held that copyright ever since, generating millions of pounds over the decades from adaptations, merchandise, stage productions, and films. On the surface, this looks like an act of charity. A childless man giving his most famous creation to an institution that saves children's lives. Beautiful. Redemptive. Exactly the kind of legacy a troubled author would want. But in the record, what we uncover is far more grotesque. Barrie ensured that Peter Pan, the story of a boy who kills children to keep them young, would be permanently tied to a hospital full of sick and dying children. He bound his fantasy about eternal youth to a place where children fight desperately to grow up at all. The hospital has benefited enormously. The Peter Pan copyright has funded research, equipment, and treatment for over 90 years. Thousands of children have been helped because of Barrie's gift. That is undeniable. But the symbolism is grotesque. Every time a child dies at Great Ormond Street Hospital, every time a family loses a son or daughter despite the best efforts of medicine, that child is lost in the same city where Barrie said his story about children who never grow up. London's parks are still full of children playing. Kensington Gardens still exists. And somewhere in the archives of that hospital, Barrie's story is still generating money from the fantasy that death is just another adventure. Barrie died in 1937 at age 77. He never married. He never had children of his own. He spent his final years alone, writing less and less, haunted by the deaths of the Davies boys he had tried to preserve through story. In his final interviews, he spoke about Peter Pan as if the character were real, as if Peter were still out there somewhere, still collecting lost boys, still refusing to grow up. Since Barrie's death, Peter Pan has been adapted dozens of times. Disney's 1953 animated film removed almost all the darkness. They made Peter a charming hero, Tinker Bell a jealous but harmless fairy, and Hook a buffoonish villain who survives his fall into the crocodile's mouth because cartoons do not allow real death. Later adaptations have tried to restore some of the original darkness. The 2003 film Peter Pan, starring Jeremy Sumpter, showed Peter as more dangerous, more feral. The 2015 film Pan attempted to explain Peter's origin as an orphan stolen from London during World War II. The series Once Upon a Time made Peter Pan the villain, revealing him as a manipulative immortal who feeds on the life force of children. And then there is the novel Lost Boy by Christina Henry, published in 2017, which retells the story from the perspective of a lost boy who realizes Peter is a monster. In this version, Peter is explicitly a murderer, a cult leader who brainwashes children into worshiping him and who kills anyone who questions his authority. This is the Peter Pan that Barrie actually wrote, finally given the horror treatment he deserves. But even these darker adaptations cannot fully escape the sanitized version that Disney burned into global consciousness. Most people still think of Peter Pan as a hero. Most parents still read the story to their children as a bedtime tale. Most audiences still believe Neverland is a place of wonder and magic. The truth remains buried. The archive remains sealed. And Peter Pan continues to collect new generations of children who do not understand what they are being offered. What Neverland really costs is this. It costs memory. Peter forgets everything. If you go with him, eventually he will forget you too. Your name, your face, everything you were will vanish from his mind. It costs growth. You will never become who you were meant to be. You will stay frozen at whatever age Peter decides is acceptable. It costs choice. Peter controls Neverland. He decides who stays and who is thinned out. You have no power there. You are his forever. And it costs life. Because Neverland is not a place you visit and return from unchanged. It is a place that takes something from you. Whether that something is your innocence, your childhood, or your actual life depends on which interpretation you believe. But all interpretations agree on one thing. No one leaves Neverland without losing something they can never get back. Barrie understood this. He built his entire story around this truth. He watched his brother die young and saw his mother refuse to let that death be real. He befriended 5 boys and watched 2 of them die tragically. He wrote stories about children who never grow up because he could not accept that growing up means leaving childhood behind forever. Peter Pan is not a celebration of youth. It is a warning about the cost of trying to preserve it. And every time someone reads this story to a child, every time Disney releases another adaptation, every time Great Ormond Street Hospital uses the copyright to fund another year of operations, Barrie's warning is ignored. The story is sweetened, softened, made safe for consumption. But the darkness is still there. The archive is still open. And Peter is still waiting in Kensington Gardens, looking for the next lost child who believes his promises. The question is no longer whether Neverland exists. The question is whether you would go there now that you know what it really is. Final part. The breaking seals. Long after the last child flew from a London window, the story of Peter Pan remains. Beloved, infamous, haunted. We have unsealed the archive that Disney tried to close. We have seen the paradise that was a graveyard, the promise that was a threat, the hero who was always the warning. Behind every flight to Neverland was a whisper of abandonment, of loss, of the irreversible cost of refusing time itself. If you listen closely, you can still hear the names that were thinned out from the bedtime stories. The real children who inspired Barrie's legend. The boys who died young. The families who told themselves their lost sons were playing somewhere beautiful, somewhere safe, somewhere they would never have to grow old. Perhaps that is the true magic and the true horror. Neverland is not a place you escape to. It is a place you must one day escape from, and some children never do. This is the legacy of Peter Pan, a tale for the hopeful and the haunted alike. If you stayed this far, you understand why these truths matter. Subscribe to the Pandora's Project if you are ready to unseal more archives. Like this episode, if seeing past the fairy dust changes how you see the stories you thought you knew. Comment which childhood tale you want us to excavate next, and what darkness you suspect is buried beneath it. What other legends or shadows in disguise? What story would you have us open next? Until then, Fellow seekers of forgotten truths, remember this. Beware the boy who never grows up. And if you hear laughter in an empty garden at twilight, walk the other way. Peter is still looking for lost boys. See you in the next tomb.